Thank you all for attending today. I'm hoping that we're going to address some of the issues that we see with the accelerated access schemes. I think the theme for the panel, I think, in our heads is that early access isn't necessarily easy access, and there has to be quite a lot of proactive planning and consideration by sponsors if they're going to use this. So we'd like to take the time to talk about the early access schemes, but also to cover any pitfalls that are commonly seen and the influence of global harmonisation on early access by sponsors. So I'll just briefly ask the panellists to introduce themselves, and then we'll start the discussion. So Wilson, if I could start with yourself. You've already heard what Wilson does. But
Yeah. So I'll say a little bit about the Office of Tissues and Advanced Therapies, which was created right at a year ago. Many of you worked previously with the Office of Cellular, Tissue, and Gene Therapies, or OCT-GT. And right at a year ago, several products that were previously in the Office of Blood Research and Review, particularly therapeutic proteins, immunoglobulins, were transferred from the Office of Blood to combine with the former OCT-GT, and we came up with the name Tissues and Advanced Therapies because we thought we could say OTAT relatively easily, and we borrowed advanced therapies from the European term for cell and gene therapies. And so we're really, over this past year, just putting our office together in a lot of ways. We've gotten new folks, both myself and the Deputy Office Director, Rachel Anatole. We're new in our positions, we're still learning, and it's a lot of fun. It's an exciting time, obviously, in cell and gene therapy, and so we're enjoying it.
Thank you. Yoshiaki?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Yoshiaki Maruyama from PMDA Japan. I'm review director of the Office of Cellular and Tissue-Based Product. I've been this office at 5 years, so most of you are now coming to the scientific advice in PMDA consultation. So many people are very familiar with me. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Narayanan?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Narayanan. I'm Vice President of Disruptive Biologics at VCLS, a consulting firm. Previously, I was a member of the Committee for Advanced Therapies representing UK and also in the Scientific Advice Working Party. And I headed the biotech unit at MHRA. And I'm a physician by background.
Paula?
Thank you. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to this very interesting meeting. My name is Paula Salmikangas. I am Director for Biologicals and ATMPs at NDA Advisory Services. I changed my position quite recently. I used to be a regulator for quite some time, 14 years in Finnish Medicines Agency, and quite many years in the Committee for Advanced Therapies, the same as Narayanan. I was the vice chair and recently last 3 years the chair of the committee evaluating all the ATMPs that came for assessment in Europe. My background is in cell and molecular biology. I also hold an adjunct professorship in Helsinki University.
Thank you. Daisaku?
Hey. Yes, good morning. I'm Daisaku Sato from Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare. Yes, I'm now in the policy side of the ministry, and I'm in charge of the pharmaceutical safety. But a year ago, I was in the PMDA and responsible for the cell and tissue-based product office. And at that time, I was a boss of Maruyama-san. And yes, I'm very pleased to see very familiar face in this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I should say that at the end, we're going to open it up for about 10-15 minutes for some questions. So you'll get the chance to ask the panel some questions at the end also. So if I could just turn to the panel, maybe I'll start, Daisaku, with you. If you could just briefly introduce the accelerated schemes that are available to people to use in your territory?
Yes, thank you very much. And we have introduced the conditional and time-limited approval system when the PMDA Act was revised in 2014. And we have 3 years experience of conditional and time-limited approval. And this scheme is quite similar to the accelerated approval of US FDA. And we can approve the product with the exploratory clinical trial, based on the exploratory clinical trials, when it demonstrates the likely to predict clinical benefit. And afterwards, in the post-marketing phase, we will set the post-marketing commitment to continue phase 3 study or post-marketing study to demonstrate the clinical benefit afterwards. And if it fails the demonstration of the clinical benefit in the post-marketing phase, the approval cannot be continued. And this scheme is applied for the regenerative medical products and also the gene therapy products. And mainly for the product indicated for the disease of life-threatening and serious ones. And we have another scheme which come into implementation in 2015. That is the Sakigake designation scheme. Sakigake means forerunner. This scheme is similar to the breakthrough therapy designation of US FDA. However, this requires the company's commitment to introduce the product firstly in Japan or simultaneously firstly with other countries. And this Sakigake designation system is in place to conduct the rolling submission and shorten the review time from regular 12 months to 6 months. And this scheme is applied for the product which has a prominent, which will likely to demonstrate prominent effectiveness for the patient, and also the new mode of actions, and for some unmet medical needs. And in this Sakigake designation scheme, we have already 6 regenerative medical products were designated as Sakigake. And yesterday we announced that the 3rd round designation application proposal receiving for the next 3rd round Sakigake designation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Paula, would you like to pick up on some of the accelerated schemes in Europe?
Yes, thank you. The conditional approval has been available for quite many years already. And there we have the same provisions as Japan, that it has to be highly debilitating or life-threatening condition and high unmet medical need. We also have approval possibility under exceptional circumstances, and that relates to conditions where collection of complete data set is not possible. That is more rare condition that used rather than conditional. And the same provisions apply to both of these two. Adaptive pathways came along a few years ago, and the adaptive pathways is meant to rely on the existing provisions, these procedures, the conditional and the approval under exceptional circumstances. What is new in the adaptive pathways is that it is expected to be a prospectively planned approach for accelerated access of products to patients. And EMA is heavily supporting companies to liaise with HTAs during the scientific advice together with EMA, so that these joint scientific advices would bring the HTA bodies to the discussions very early on. And of course, collection of real-world evidence is something that is very much looked forward in the adaptive pathways. PRIME scheme was launched last year, and that is an early proactive enhanced support to developers. And there we have specificities that do not apply to other applications. Those that get PRIME designation will get rapporteurship nomination very early on, so that the main assessment team will be known early on to the developer. There are frequent meetings, not only scientific advice meetings, but also kick-off meetings and meetings with the rapporteur team and the EMA colleagues. Scientific advice is expected to take place every time there are some milestone developments coming, key decision-making situations. There will be enhanced support to the developers. There are fee incentives, and expectation is that these products that are under the PRIME scheme, that they would go through the accelerated assessment. And this is different from US. With accelerated assessment, it means that there is a shortened time period for the review. And this means that the package, the full package, has to be quite compelling and quite good quality, because it doesn't allow much questions from the regulatory side. If there are a lot of questions and need for additional evaluation time, the normal timetable will prevail. But I would also like to mention, under the PRIME scheme, I looked the statistics through. We have had 12 products out of 28 thus far approved products are ATMPs. So 43% of all PRIME products are ATMPs. And actually 12 out of 35 applications, ATMP applications, have been approved. So the success rate for the ATMPs has been around 33%. About the same as you have in US, 1/3 has been approved. And from EU, I would also like to mention that there are two procedures which are not really directly related to access, accelerated access, but the ATMP classification and also the possibility to certify quality and non-clinical data are meant to support the developers in their path towards approval.
Okay, thank you. Narayan, would you like to add any more from a European perspective, or European member states? Or?
I just want to add a few things from maybe an industry perspective, although putting my regulatory hat on as much as possible. In terms of the statistics for the PRIME designation, the ATMPs have more than double the chance of succeeding PRIME designation compared to non-ATMP. So I think there's a significant realization about the value of this, and pretty much all of them are gene therapy product, which I take. It reflects that somehow the regulators are probably happier with the gene therapies as compared to cell therapies. I don't know the exact proportion, but it seems like there's more confidence in gene therapies going forward. But I just want to make a few points about the accelerated approval. In my view, it may be controversial, I think it already existed, because if you look at Article 14 of the ATMP regulation, it stipulates follow-up of not only safety, also efficacy for advanced therapy products. So it's always been a regulatory requirement, which wasn't the case for non-ATMPs. So the only way to create a level playing field, if you like, if you're going to increase the post-authorization requirement, is to make sure the pre-authorization requirements are balanced in some way, so that overall burden is not dissimilar between ATMPs and non-ATMPs. So and if you look at the approved products, out of the 8 approved products, 3 were under conditional approval, 1 under exceptional circumstances. There's a high proportion already going through an accelerated procedure. But what is good about the new procedure is, of course, the appointment of a rapporteur, which means that they're going to hold your hands and help you through so you make fewer mistakes. I think that will be the benefit of this new procedure. So that should, I think, go a long way in helping the industry, those who get prime. But I would argue that even if you don't get prime designation, I would still say that you should be ambitious enough to go for more accelerated approval in principle, because we have so much more post-approval commitment. That will be my view.
Okay, thank you. Wilson, you already touched on RMAT and breakthrough. Would you like to expand on, and in particular, the difference between that? Would you like to expand on that?
Sure. So it's interesting. We have a number of expedited programs. We've got fast track. And when I come to conferences, nobody asks me about fast track. Nobody asks me about priority review. They ask about RMAT and they ask about breakthrough designation. And our experience with RMAT designation has in some ways been similar to our experience with breakthrough designation. As I mentioned, of the requests for RMAT designation, we're granting about a third of those. For our office, if you look at our experience with breakthrough designation, we're granting about a third of those. But the criteria for RMAT designation are certainly different than the criteria for breakthrough designation. Both require preliminary clinical evidence. But with RMAT designation, there's this term about the potential to address an unmet medical need. And with breakthrough designation, there's no mention of just potential. It's demonstrated a substantial improvement over available therapies. So breakthrough requires this evidence of a substantial improvement, and RMAT doesn't require that. And RMAT has that term potential, which is not in breakthrough designation and criteria. And so what we've seen in our experience is that the breakthrough designation was serving very well in a lot of ways for gene therapy. That is, about 50% of our requests for breakthrough designation that were gene therapies got approved. But for cell therapies, it was about 15%. So there was a big discrepancy between gene therapies and cell therapies. And so there really was, if the idea is to facilitate, that these expedited programs will facilitate and boost the field for both cell and gene therapy. It was working well for gene therapy, but maybe not so well for cell therapy. And I think that the RMAT designation is helping to fill that gap. Now, our experience with breakthrough designation is that we approve a new breakthrough designation a little less than once every 2 months. Our current pace is to approve a new RMAT designation about once a month. So we're going about twice as fast with RMAT designation. And so we really feel like it's going to fill that gap and help to spur the development of cell therapy along with gene therapy. Again, I felt like breakthrough designation was doing just fine for gene therapy, but cell therapy needed an extra boost, and Congress obviously wanted to focus on these areas as well.
Okay. I think what's came out from everyone, though, is that there's still quite a high failure rate for people going through the accelerated routes. Could we start to disentangle what are the common errors that sponsors make in their applications? Is it simply that they don't have the correct data set, or are they just attacking it from the wrong way? Are there any common issues? I'll start with you, Wilson.
Oh, there's so many issues. Oh my gosh. Where do I want to start? Many, the big pharmaceutical companies, they're just starting now to get into the cell and gene area. And most of our experience has been with small companies and academic investigators who are just starting to learn how to do drug development. And so we spend a lot of time working with these folks to try to get them to understand what's going to be necessary in the long road. It's not just a question of getting into the clinic. It's the question of how am I going to get this product on the market so that patients will get the benefit of it. And we've emphasized to folks that what we call the target product profile of early in development, long before the clinical studies have started. The sponsor should be sitting down and thinking, what am I trying to bring to patients? What is that label going to look like? And once you fix on that, then it can help you to design the development program that is efficient. Too often we see, particularly academic sponsors, get stuck on just getting into the clinic and not moving forward. It's amazing how much we have to push folks to move forward and to design that very first study to get the optimum amount of data. Many times we're dealing with very rare diseases, and those patients are very precious. And we need to get as much evidence from each clinical study that's going to move development forward. We need to find out early on, does this product look like it's going to work or not? And so well-designed phase 1 studies and thinking from the beginning, where am I going with this? And that's the small drug companies, the academic investigators really need to work closely with consultants, regulators, whoever, to sort that out so that this can be done more efficiently. Okay.
Yoshiaki, I see that you're nodding. Do you see the same thing in Japan?
Yeah, same things. But I should mention about Sakigake designation system more a little bit. So that designation system, the review period is, like as Dr. Sato said, 6 months. So 6 months is very tough. So, like as Paula said, that applicant dossier must be good quality. So that's why we have before submission, the marketing authorization application, we have a rolling submission system. So that's during the rolling submission, it's CMC part, non-clinical, clinical consultation is mandatory. So during the rolling submission, we review that data and also advise that how to finalize that applicant dossier. So that must be needed to move forward to this scheme.
And do the small developers find the rolling submission helpful, or do they find it hard to
I hope they are very helpful.
helpful?
Yeah, that the rolling submission is totally depends on how sponsor collecting data, or how to know how apply.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult situation, but we are just trying to to move forward
to help them. Yeah. So Narayan, you were a regulator. Now you're advising people on submissions. So you can see it from both sides. When you're interacting with developers, do you see common problems with the accelerated scheme? Do you think that, Wilson's already said that people aren't taking a long enough view, and I know that at Catapult we see this all the time. Is that a common thing that you see, or do you see subtle different problems?
I think it's getting better, but still there is this tendency to think short term, one step at a time, which is fine in terms of doing it, but I think in terms of thinking, they have to start thinking long term from the very beginning, because otherwise you probably end up making mistakes, and some of them do that, and then they lose time and money doing that. So I think I take the view that you have to take everything into consideration right up to the end. Start thinking about the end and then work backwards and plan the whole journey. If you don't do that, if you go down the traditional route, I think you're more likely to make mistakes. Which means that, I couldn't agree more about target product profile. I think that's critical. If you take, for example, the non-clinical model, they are very difficult. There are no easy models. And there are, you can't do healthy volunteer studies and so on. There are so many differences. So I think we need to think outside the box and come up with the solution that is relevant for the product, for the indication, especially in the case of rare diseases where every patient counts and you can't do the phase 1, 2, 3 kind of thing and then follow that path. So there are lots of fundamental differences, I think, and also the commercialization is an issue. It's something to start thinking early on and put it as part of the whole package and understand the risk and maybe think about risk sharing early on rather than even for late.
And for a lot of the small companies, there's a tension between bringing in sufficient investment, and to do that quite often you have to show early clinical data. So what we are saying as a regulatory panel is plan, take time, but there is a tension. And do you think the regulators could help with that in any way? If the investor community understood that if you took 3 months longer to plan it, then it would help? Or do you think that tension is a consideration that the regulators should have or not? Daisaku, if I can.
Yes. In Japan, in a situation that the SME, I learned the European terminology SME, the small and medium enterprise, and also the academics societies are very interested in developing regenerative medicine product, and actually in the consultations, SMEs coming a lot of chance for us. And it's very different from the large pharmaceutical companies, and we stress the importance of the preparedness for the development. Actually, we encourage the early consultations to come, and we tell them that if we choose the conditional approval, but the totality of the development in the long course is the same as the normal approval. This is just the balance of the post-marketing and pre-marketing burden of collecting evidence. So as Dr. Bryan said in his presentation, that when the sponsor comes to our office, we have to discuss what can be done for the post-marketing study and the continuing phase 3 study when we approved in the conditions based on the exploratory clinical trial. So in some case, the post-marketing study is quite difficult in the condition that once the approval is done, the normal patient are paid by the healthcare insurance system. It's very difficult to set control or something. In such case, we sometimes advise that please continue phase 3 without selecting the conditional time-limited authorizations. So I think this totality of the evidence in the course of the development in life cycle is very important.
And a couple of the panel members, we've talked about the tension between pre-marketing requirements and post-marketing requirements. Paula, would you like to pick up on what developers should be thinking about with conditional authorizations? Quite often significant post-marketing requirements, which I think a lot of people don't appreciate, and they may have to expand their quality package or take more clinical data. With your experience in CAT, where do you think the balance is there? When they should be considering an accelerated scheme or taking time and just doing it through the normal route?
Well, I have to say that the first MAAs that the CAT was evaluating, they were very much based on retrospective data collection. And I really hope that this is going to change for these accelerated schemes, that there is prospective planning and more concentration really on what the product is, what is the design of the product, what are the intentions. I fully agree with Wilson and others saying that it is imperative to know what the company is working with. And if part of the product development is left post-marketing, it means very difficult comparability studies. And when we are talking about cells and tissues, genetically modified cells, very complex products, the dimension of difficulty in the comparability studies is even higher. And so I fully understand that you have seen that some products have turned into totally different products after such changes. And I think, of course, we have indications where we need very long follow-up of patients, and we cannot expect that we will have 10-year long clinical trials to satisfy the needs of the evidence. So we have to have some ways to smoothly collect also data in such cases and to provide the possibility to collect real world evidence, whatever that means. I hope that we get some answers in future years to come. But we have seen that also registry data can be used to support decision making, and I think that is a good way forward.
I'd like to pick up on registry, especially since I think it was last week the Japanese announced that the National Regenerative Medicine Database Scheme. So obviously you're doing that in Japan to gather this post-marketing data. Could you expand? I don't know who would expand on the registry and how it operates, because I know that in the US there was the pilot with the CAR-T registry, and gathering data that way. So if we could start with the Japanese scheme and why you've actually decided to do it, and what triggered you to decide to invest in it.
Yes, thank you for your questions. It is called NRMD. Yes, the registry database created jointly by PMDA and JSRM. It's Japanese Society of Regenerative Medicine. So it's a joint project of the regulatory authority and the academic society. And usually we ask the post-marketing commitment to collect the post-marketing data when we approve the regenerative medical products. And in the post-marketing commitment, the companies will register the individual case report in this NRMD. At the same time, NRMD, in collaboration with other relevant specific academic society, to correct the patient data relating to these kind of products. And of course, in one database, we don't ask the company to share the data with each other. The data are registered separately, company by company, but the regulator can compare the data within the database. And the reason why we stress the importance of the registry is that it's very easy to follow up long-term safety and efficacy of the regenerative medicine product. And also, we can observe the comparison of the case of the treated by regenerative medical product and also non-treated patient groups in the post-marketing studies. And this is a very, we expect the high-quality data collection for the real-world evidence in the post-marketing phase.
Okay, thank you. And Wilson, if I can come to the US pilot for the CAR-Ts, is that something that you're considering rolling out for all regenerative medicines, or?
Oh my gosh. So when you talk about registries, I guess we have different registries, but so we do have this CAUTI product that was approved recently.
I think people might have heard of that.
The good folks at Novartis developed this CAR-T product, and that has a post-marketing commitment for a registry study of 1,000 patients. I mean, it's going to take 20 years to do that study, but what you mentioned, the CAR-T project, I think you're referring to something that's a little different, and I think there's some misconceptions in the community about what this is. At the FDA, particularly in cell and gene therapy, we've got a lot of sponsors who are getting a little bit of data on their product in clinical development. They have a few patients, 3 patients, or 10 patients, or 20 patients, and we're worried that some of these products are going to have some bad safety issues that we're not going to catch on to early enough. And so we want to see if we can look at data from a class of products to find some early safety signals. Now, this is something that we haven't been particularly good at the FDA, looking at a class of products early in development, things that, to be honest, may never make it to market. But if we could identify safety signals early on, then we could advise sponsors perhaps on how to mitigate those risks and how to more efficiently develop those products to get around those safety issues. But we are trying to develop that capability. So we've started this CAR-T pilot project. And we chose CAR-T because of, as opposed to some other class of products, because it was obvious to us that these products seemed to have potential for great efficacy and they clearly have potential for great safety risks. And so we're working to, with several of the sponsors of these products have given us data that we're working on modeling and trying to take different approaches to see if we can work out how the FDA can look at things early in development for a class of products across INDs. Now, there is no intention that this project is going to generate a report about efficacy or safety of CAUTI products. Mainly, we're just trying to learn what capabilities do we have at the FDA to work with data, and hopefully develop approaches that ultimately will allow us to advise individual sponsors. And again, we very much appreciate that several of the sponsors have been willing to participate and donate their data, because we think that ultimately, if we can make this work, it's something that will be useful not just for CAR-T products, but for other classes of products. And we think that it's particularly relevant for cell and gene therapy, where we think the upside of efficacy is so huge and the downside of safety is so huge as well. So that's what we're up to. I think some folks are expecting that this database is going to generate some pronouncement from the agency about safety or efficacy of these products. It's not going to happen. That's not a guarantee, but I don't think that's where we're headed. We're headed to trying to learn what the FDA can do early in development to improve our own skills.
Okay. Before I move on to the European question, if I could just come back to the Japanese registry, will that data actually be fed back if you're starting to see safety signals in your registry? Presumably that, just like Wilson's saying, will you be feeding that back to the companies? So it really is going to be a pharmacovigilance post-marketing safety database as well? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So in Europe, registries. You've got 28 member states. Do we have a European registry? Do we have registries that link up together? Either Narayan or Paula, do you have any insight?
Well, I can say that inside EMA, when I was still chairing the CAT, there was a task force established to look into how to best collect registry data, and some pilot cases were initiated. I don't have any information how far they led actually, but I know that there is quite a lot of interest inside EMA at the moment to pay attention to the quality of the registry data and completeness. And I think those are very important aspects also for reimbursement bodies. Inside EU member states, there is, for example, Italy that has the Medicines Agency of Italy has the right to expect companies with new products to join registries. Some of them are disease registries, others are dedicated for a certain intention, more product-based. And I think that scheme is mainly due to the reimbursement issues. They want to collect nationally enough data to be able to make decisions on reimbursement. But it's very scattered in Europe, how things work. I don't know, Narayanan, you know much better UK situation and
I think it's highly variable. I think that is a problem. So you don't know whether the data you get is representative of the real population. You get that, and whether it could actually be misleading than helpful. I'm not sure. But I mean, I don't know much more about registry. I just want to make one point about the efficacy versus safety, because at least in the ATMP experience in Europe that I've gone through, safety didn't seem to be a major stumbling block for most of the ATMPs, at least, and maybe the CAUTI is an exception. And I just wonder whether concentrating too much on safety is actually going to lead to a product that is only marginally efficacious, because that's going to harm the reimbursement issue. So while we would like a product that is 100% efficacious and 0%, absolutely no safety issue, and that's not going to happen, I just wonder whether, especially in the short term, you're not going to find safety signal for many of these products, especially gene therapies. So is the excessive reliance on safety in the short term, which you may not see any safety signal, is that going to then lead to a dose that's going to be, suboptimal? And is that going to, because you only have one shot at these products, you don't have a second shot. So my view is that you have to take certain risks here and then aim for better efficacy, because if you're going to be slightly efficacious and then comes along a chemical which is 1/10 the price, then you're gone. You're not able to sell it. So I think that it's got to be a higher ambition in my view.
I would agree with that, Paula.
Just to add something, I think that with ATMPs, and especially with gene therapies, we are still in a phase where we don't know enough. One indication of that is the very late event of oncogenesis for ex-kid. 15 years after administration, it took 15 years for this particular cell clone to grow and cause the disease, the secondary disease in the patient. So I think that with the novel technologies, when we are going even further for more complex products, we are going to see some drawbacks, and only time will tell us how much information we need before approval, and then what can be left post-marketing.
I think that's true, but I also think that there's a balance, isn't there? Because they are risky products, perhaps, but they're also life-saving. So there has to be an appreciation of that risk-benefit balance. And there's a mind shift required, just like there was for bone marrow transplant when it first came about in the 70s. It wasn't very safe, but it did ultimately save lives. So I think you're right. I think there's a learning experience, isn't there? I'm mindful of time, and I want to give some options for some questions. So are there any questions from the floor? Are there microphones?
Yeah, I got it. I was sitting right next to her. Germaine Fu from BD Biosciences. So we've heard a lot about how clinical development is accelerated under these new regulatory frameworks. Could you please comment on how the new regulatory framework helps to expedite or provides accommodations or flexibility on the CMC and manufacturing side?
To all the panel? Can I start with you, Wilson, since you're closest to me?
So new regulatory framework, CMC and manufacturing. So 21st century cures, I talked about section 3033, which talks about regenerative medicine therapies and regenerative medicine advanced therapies. There, section 3034 talks about the FDA developing a guidance on devices for the recovery, isolation, and delivery of regenerative medicine therapies. And we are working diligently on putting that guidance together. Also, section 3036 of 21st Century Cures says, and I'll get the wording a little off, I'm sure, that the FDA will work with stakeholders, including the National Institute of Standards and other stakeholders, on facilitating the development of standards for regenerative medicine therapies. And we recently had a request for proposals and recently approved a contract with a company called Nexite for that purpose, to meet the requirements of 3036. So we're going to work with them and other stakeholders in trying to develop standards for regenerative medicine therapy. So that's something that we're doing in the CMC arena.
In Japan?
Yeah. But CMC development also very limited the early access product schemes for the product. So basically, we have a specific for that regenerative medical product for that GMP. We call that GCTP. That's different. Not say different, but basically the same. But so GCTP is more flexible because it's strictly taken that the GMP. The regenerative medical product is a very tough situation, so that's why we making that new system for the GCTP, and then and also we encourage that not process validation, verification, because sometimes that characterization for that product also very limited. So that's why that sometimes say that yeah, process is validated, but there is not so many experience for that product produce the products. So that's why that we recommended the verification. That means that verified each product or to release that product. Yeah.
Well, I'm not an expert on CMC. I'll probably leave it to Paula. All I can say is that I've come across companies who are who's already started what they think is a confirmatory clinical trial, and they're planning to make major manufacturing changes, which I think is a really bad idea. So especially considering accelerated approval, I think you've got to get the manufacturing finalized early on so that you don't get into these comparability issues, which I'll pass on to Paula.
Well, in EU there are many initiatives to help also with the CMC issues. You may know that GMP regulations have not been really fitting to or the ATMPs do not fit the expectations on the GMP. So there will be, there actually was already a release of the new legal framework for allowing the ATMPs to have different GMP framework for manufacturing, and or some justified flexibilities. And also the GMO legislation, the genetically modified organisms legislation, has been prohibiting a lot of development in EU, and that is under discussions in Commission and in CAT at the moment, and I hope that early next year we will see some relieving news also on that aspect. But I think that the possibility to certify the quality and non-clinical data early on is a very good tool. It's not much used thus far, but I think that should be way forward to look already early on when the developers are going to the key trials, perhaps to check with the regulators if everything is okay or something additional is required. It's a little bit the same way as you have in US, the way to collaborate with the regulators and check with milestones.
Yeah.
And of course, I think good support from suitable companies with the product development, if there is not much capability in-house, would be the easiest and smoothest way forward, I guess. And scientific advice. Cannot say anything else.
Any other questions? We've got a couple up there.
Yeah. Do you want me to come up to the mic, or can I talk loud?
Either.
I'll talk loud. So this is for, thank you, for Europe in particular. So in the United States, we have it pretty easy because all states have to comply with FDA requirements. It's our understanding that in the EU, you have to meet, obviously, the EMA requirements, but then there may be different, sometimes stricter, sometimes just different requirements in each of the member countries. Can you just comment on that from a regulatory standpoint for those of us who are thinking about moving beyond the US into the European market?
Well, actually, we do have a centralized system for marketing authorization. So when the application is sent to the European Medicines Agency and when it's approved, the license will be valid throughout all the member states. So in that respect, we do not have any objections or any possibilities to deviate from the final decision. So the license is valid throughout Europe. Where we do have national differences is clinical trials, and that has been problematic in some cases, especially the multi-site trials. I think Narayanan is able to talk more about that, but the clinical trial regulation came just recently, was adopted, and I hope that will bring relief also to the conduct of clinical trials in Europe.
Yeah, I think the clinical trial approval will still remain a national responsibility, but the idea is that they reach consensus so that there are fewer differences and hopefully will facilitate multi-center trials. I mean, there is a procedure at the moment that's called the not mutual recognition.
It's the voluntary
harmonization procedure that sometimes works well, but like Paula said, there are things like GMO requirements which vary enormously between country to country. Somewhere, in some countries, it's deliberate release, and in some other countries, it's more controlled release and so on, which sometimes causes problem and delay. The difference as opposed to US FDA is that the scientific advice in the European Medicines Agency is primarily written. You may be called in for a meeting, but it's not mandatory. Whereas if you want to have a discussion, then you need to go to national agencies, have a discussion, which is a more open discussion. So you can mix and match, and so those are probably some of the differences we have with US FDA.
There was another question.
Thanks so much for this very interesting panel. Dr. Bryan, maybe coming back to some of your prepared remarks, you talked about the need for reproduction of results across multiple trial sites. You also talked about some settings where a control arm would be required. I guess some of the therapies that we're seeing have such dramatic effect in such high unmet medical need that even one single site may provide some very compelling data. Other therapies have compelling benefit but require very invasive delivery, maybe into the brain or the spinal cord. How much flexibility do you believe the agency should have when the magnitude of effect is very high to bend some of those rules, or when the delivery modality is so invasive that exposing patients to kind of a sham invasive procedure may also be difficult?
Oh my gosh, there's so much wrapped up in that question. So to some extent, I'm not going to comment on what our regulatory flexibility should be. I'll say that we have a lot of regulatory flexibility, that what we require for marketing approval is, from an efficacy standpoint, is substantial evidence of effectiveness based on adequate and well-controlled investigations. And substantial evidence, that certainly varies with the situation. That substantial evidence in a very common disease, a disease perhaps where there isn't a great unmet medical need, that's very different than substantial evidence in a rare, life-threatening disease. And we recognize that. The issue of whether, if your product is delivered by some invasive means, somebody putting something into the brain or putting something into the spinal cord or into the heart or what, that sort of thing actually, and I'm a regulator, so what I do is I worry. And certainly these invasive technologies make me worried about safety. But no matter how worried I am about safety, you still need substantial evidence of effectiveness based on adequate and well-controlled investigations. And there get to be ethical issues about sham controls and that sort of thing that we can argue about, but the data have to be good. I was, I think, very impressed recently with a development program. This wasn't a cell or gene therapy, but it was a product, I think it's called nusinersen for spinal muscular atrophy, infantile spinal muscular atrophy. This is a very rare, very bad disease that's killing kids. And somehow, Biogen, the good folks at Biogen, managed to do a randomized controlled trial in that space. And we've heard from many people that you cannot do a randomized controlled trial in that space. And we hear often that things can't be done, and then somebody does them. And what that trial did was it ended early. It ended early because the effect was so dramatic. And we can argue whether that was the right thing to do or not, but I think it got that product on the market a lot faster and got that product to more patients faster because of the approach that they took. Now, I think I've said enough.
We're actually over time, and I've been told that I have to finish on time, so I'm not going to be able to take any more questions. I'm really sorry, but I'm sure the panel members won't mind if you ask questions outside of here. So I'd like to thank the panel members. Thank you so much. It was a very good talk. Thank you.